I stood before the familiar red brick mansion in Columbus after 5 years of complete disappearance. My name is Gina, a 32-year-old woman returning to the very place that systematically erased my existence. I still remember the exact moment my family stripped away my bedroom, along with my inheritance and my rightful executive position, just to hand everything over to my younger sister. My parents always looked at me with eyes full of absolute disappointment while treating my mere presence in that house as an unbearable burden. They practically worshipped my younger sister as the absolute center of power while discarding me like worthless trash. I did not come back today carrying any tears or fragile weakness to beg for affection from the people sharing my bloodline. My ultimate goal is extremely cold and meticulously calculated because I will personally take back every single thing that belongs to me while watching their entire empire collapse into absolute ruin. They thought I was a pathetic loser who ran away from the battlefield, but they completely forgot that the quietest people often plan the most devastating storms. Before we dive deep into this intense journey of calculated family revenge and absolute financial takeover, please take a quick moment to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Hitting that like button really helps the algorithm push this content so we can keep bringing you more thrilling dramas. Now let us witness exactly how a discarded daughter returns from the shadows to reclaim her stolen throne. On Monday morning, I officially stepped into the cold basement of the fashion corporate headquarters to begin my new position as a low-level fabric inventory clerk. Securing this manual labor job required me to utilize a completely fake identity alongside a drastically altered physical appearance to ensure absolute anonymity. I had purposely dyed my hair a dull brown color while wearing cheap, oversized clothing to completely erase any resemblance to the woman I used to be. Submitting those forged identification documents allowed me to easily bypass the rigorous human resources screening process without triggering any internal security alarms. The disguise worked flawlessly because every single manager simply looked right through me as if I were just another invisible gear in their massive corporate machine. I spent the first few hours organizing heavy rolls of imported silk while silently memorizing the security camera blind spots scattered throughout the underground storage facility. My physical exhaustion was completely overshadowed by the sharp clarity of my ultimate mission to dismantle this corrupt organization from the inside out. Later that same morning, the heavy double doors at the end of the main corridor swung open to reveal my father and my mother. They had come down to the basement level to conduct a routine quarterly inspection of the raw material stockpiles before the upcoming seasonal launch. Dad and Mom walked down the central aisle with an unmistakable air of superiority, while completely ignoring the exhausted workers clearing the path for them. They stopped mere feet away from my workstation to complain about rising supply costs, with a total disregard for the people doing the heavy lifting. I kept my head bowed over my inventory clipboard while listening to them casually discuss cutting employee benefits to increase their personal quarterly dividends. They looked directly at my disguised figure for a brief second before turning away, with the cold indifference that wealthy corporate owners typically reserve for cheap laborers. It was incredibly poetic to witness them failing to recognize their own flesh and blood, standing right there in the damp shadows of their precious empire. The quiet murmurs of the warehouse crew abruptly stopped when the stainless steel doors of the exclusive VIP elevator suddenly slid open. I slowly looked up from my clipboard to see my younger sister Tamara stepping out alongside my younger sister's fiancé Levi. Tamara and Levi paraded onto the dusty concrete floor, wearing outrageously expensive designer garments that aggressively highlighted their unearned wealth and overwhelming arrogance. They walked shoulder to shoulder with matching expressions of sheer disgust, as if breathing the unfiltered basement air was beneath their elevated social status. Tamara barked orders at the facility supervisor, while Levi smugly typed on his phone without ever making eye contact with the people scurrying around them. Their sudden arrival forced several workers to scramble out of the way just to avoid brushing against their pristine luxury coats. Tamara was aggressively flipping through a thick stack of printed financial documents when she carelessly collided with a metal storage cart near my designated work area. The sudden impact caused her to drop the entire stack of papers right onto the dirty floor, directly touching the toes of my heavy work boots. Instead of acknowledging her own clumsiness, she simply crossed her arms over her chest and glared down at me with absolute contempt, burning in her eyes. She loudly ordered me to get down on my knees immediately to pick up her scattered mess and organize the pages in their proper numerical order. I noticed Dad and Mom watching the minor altercation unfold from a distance, but they merely turned their heads away to allow Tamara to freely exercise her tyrannical authority. They clearly believed that humiliating a random warehouse employee was a perfectly acceptable way for their favorite daughter to establish dominance in the workplace. I maintained absolute silence while slowly lowering myself to the cold concrete floor because starting a foolish argument would instantly jeopardize my entire infiltration strategy. The process of carefully gathering the scattered documents one by one allowed me to secretly memorize the confidential account numbers prominently displayed on the top of the financial spreadsheets. Presenting the perfectly neat pile back to Tamara required absolute composure to prevent myself from displaying a single ounce of anger or fragile emotion. She forcefully snatched the documents from my calloused hands with a dramatic scoff before turning her back to continue her arrogant march through the facility. Levi offered a mocking smirk in my direction before quickly following his partner toward the inventory supervisor office at the far end of the warehouse. Standing back up to quietly brush the dirt off my knees served as a firm reminder that my true purpose here was to observe their structural vulnerabilities. Every moment of their arrogant disrespect only fueled my cold determination to map out the financial rot hidden deep within the foundation of this company. Returning to counting the silk rolls with a steady heartbeat confirmed that the process of dismantling their precious empire had officially begun in the darkest corner of their own building. By Wednesday night, the overhead lighting system in the basement warehouse had completely shut down, leaving only the pale blue glow of my workstation monitor illuminating the dark concrete space. The massive corporate headquarters above me was entirely empty, which provided the perfect opportunity to execute the most critical phase of my infiltration strategy without any unnecessary interruptions. I pulled out my secure encrypted phone to establish a private connection with my best friend Gina. She was a highly skilled former IT department employee for this very fashion company who cleverly retained a top-level administrative account that had never been properly deactivated by the current management team. Utilizing her forgotten credentials allowed me to bypass the external security protocols to log directly into the internal accounting servers without needing to perform any unrealistic firewall hacking techniques. The digital gateway swung open effortlessly, granting me unrestricted access to the deeply hidden financial records encompassing the entire corporate enterprise. Navigating through the complex labyrinth of corporate expenditures immediately revealed massive discrepancies hidden within the upcoming winter collection budget. Dozens of highly suspicious fabric purchase invoices materializing on the screen demonstrated that tens of millions of dollars were being systematically drained from the primary operational accounts. Following the digital paper trail exposed the glaring reality that these enormous sums of money were completely bypassing our established textile manufacturing partners located overseas. The capital was instead being aggressively funneled into completely unknown third-party entities under the guise of premium raw material procurement for the new seasonal launch. I picked up my phone to update my accomplice with a voice entirely stripped of all warmth or any lingering hesitation regarding my next tactical move. Nina, your administrative account got me straight into the central data vault where I can clearly see them rapidly moving the corporate money out. My focus remained entirely locked on the cascading columns of fraudulent numbers while waiting for her to process the severity of the financial situation playing out on my screen. Nina let out a heavy sigh through the receiver before replying with genuine disbelief clearly evident in her quiet voice. Just download every single one of those invoices because while I know your family is exceptionally cruel, I certainly did not expect them to completely destroy themselves like this. Heeding her cautious advice prompted me to immediately initiate a highly comprehensive background trace on the specific destination accounts currently receiving the embezzled corporate funds. Tracking the complex routing numbers required meticulously sifting through layers of intentionally misleading financial transfers designed to confuse any potential corporate auditors inspecting the books. Cross-referencing the employer identification numbers listed on the questionable vendor contracts led me directly to the corporate registry databases located in the state of Nevada. The official documentation clearly confirmed that all three newly formed shell companies were legally registered under the exact same residential address. Digging slightly deeper into the state filing paperwork, undeniably proved that the sole registered owner of these fraudulent corporate entities was Levi. The most devastating piece of evidence emerged when I pulled up the digital authorization signatures attached to every single outbound wire transfer routing the stolen cash. Tamara had personally signed off on the massive capital disbursements by utilizing her executive vice president privileges to intentionally override all standard accounting department auditing procedures. The profound realization hit me with absolute clarity that my younger sister, alongside her arrogant fiancé, were actively executing a highly sophisticated embezzlement scheme to rob the entire company blind. They were deliberately orchestrating the rapid financial ruin of the fashion empire, while continually smiling directly into the faces of the parents who foolishly worshipped them as perfect heirs. I carefully transferred the entire batch of incriminatory financial documents onto my military-grade encrypted hard drive to ensure the sensitive data remained entirely secure from any internal tracking software. Compiling this undeniable proof of massive federal wire fraud finally gave me the ultimate weapon needed to expose the sickening hypocrisy rotting the core of my treacherous family. Securing the digital device inside my jacket pocket brought a profound sense of dark satisfaction, knowing Dad and Mom were actively being bled dry by the precious daughter they chose over me. The critical data extraction operation in the basement was now completely successful, so I quietly powered down the workstation monitor to slip out into the freezing Columbus night. By Friday noon, the grand main lobby of the corporate headquarters was completely transformed to host the highly anticipated winter collection launch event. The facility manager abruptly reassigned me from the isolated basement warehouse to the main reception floor to carry heavy trays of beverages for the wealthy investors currently attending the exclusive gathering. Wearing a cheap, oversized catering uniform made me virtually invisible among the elite crowd dressed in custom-tailored garments. Navigating through the dense sea of corporate executives required extreme caution to avoid disrupting the carefully orchestrated atmosphere of the high society function. I focused entirely on delivering the signature drinks to the designated VIP tables, while continuously monitoring the professional interactions happening around the central presentation stage. Tamara suddenly appeared from the private executive lounge area, aggressively marching through the crowd with her usual sense of arrogant entitlement alongside Levi. She deliberately altered her walking path the very moment she spotted my disguised figure approaching the main aisle with a fully loaded beverage tray. Stepping directly into my trajectory allowed her to forcefully slam her shoulder against mine with undeniable malicious intent right in front of the major stakeholders. The violent physical impact instantly caused the precarious tray of hot coffee to tip over and spill entirely down the front of my cheap white uniform shirt. Several nearby guests loudly gasped at the sudden crashing sound of shattered porcelain echoing across the otherwise elegant corporate reception space, while Levi simply chuckled at the destruction. Instead of exploding into a predictable fit of defensive rage, I simply planted my feet firmly on the marble floor to completely steady my posture. The scalding liquid seeping through the thin fabric of my shirt was entirely secondary to the absolute emotional clarity washing over my mind in that exact moment. Maintaining complete psychological control allowed me to stare directly into her eyes while she proudly displayed a twisted smirk of undeniable satisfaction. She clearly expected me to break down in tears or frantically apologize like a terrified subordinate, desperate to keep her minimum wage paycheck. My complete lack of fear or submission seemed to briefly confuse her before her arrogant superiority complex violently reasserted itself. Tamara dramatically brushed a microscopic drop of spilled liquid off her designer sleeve before loudly delivering a razor-sharp insult designed for maximum public humiliation. "Look at your filthy appearance right now, because a pathetic janitor like you will never belong in a place like this." I locked my cold gaze with her condescending stare while keeping my vocal tone completely devoid of any trembling weakness or defensive anger. "You are absolutely right about that because this specific position truly is not for me." Dad and Mom were standing merely a few feet away, engaging in polite conversation with a major textile supplier, when the loud commotion interrupted their networking efforts. They clearly witnessed their favorite daughter actively assaulting a subordinate employee with hot coffee, but their facial expressions only registered mild annoyance at the public disruption. Neither of them stepped forward to offer any basic human decency or reprimand Tamara for her blatantly abusive workplace behavior. They simply frowned at my stained uniform with pure disgust before completely turning their backs to us to continue entertaining their wealthy business associates. Their chilling apathy firmly cemented the harsh reality that they lacked even the most basic moral compass when it came to protecting innocent people from their favorite child. Witnessing their blatant complicity completely extinguished any microscopic shred of lingering familial loyalty I might have secretly harbored deep inside my heart. Refusing to participate in their pathetic corporate theater for another second, I calmly untied the soiled catering apron from my waist. Tossing the ruined garment directly into a nearby waste receptacle signaled the absolute termination of my calculated infiltration phase. I turned my back on the glittering celebration and walked straight toward the massive glass exit doors with my head held impeccably high. Every single step away from that corrupt environment felt like shedding a suffocating layer of false identity that I no longer needed to maintain to gather my evidence. Leaving that toxic building behind me meant the time for silent observation was officially over, and the relentless era of total financial devastation was finally about to begin. At exactly 9 o'clock on Monday morning, I sat comfortably crossed-legged on a plush leather chair inside a prestigious legal office located on the 40th floor of a downtown Columbus high-rise. My lawyer, Arthur, entered the quiet conference room with a deeply serious expression while pushing a remarkably thick folder containing numerous commercial credit contracts across the polished mahogany desk. Securing his elite legal representation was the very first strategic maneuver I implemented long before deciding to step foot inside that damp basement warehouse, wearing a fake identity. We had spent the last several months meticulously coordinating a highly classified financial operation, utilizing the vast capital generated by my completely anonymous private equity fund. Executing this covert acquisition strategy allowed me to systematically purchase every single outstanding bank loan alongside the primary commercial mortgages, directly tied to the fashion empire my parents desperately cherished. Operating entirely through heavily shielded corporate subsidiaries ensured that nobody within my treacherous family ever suspected their discarded daughter was quietly acquiring their massive corporate debt from the local financial institutions. The colossal stack of legally binding documents currently resting between us on the table represented the absolute financial leverage required to orchestrate a flawless hostile takeover of their entire organization. Opening the heavy leather briefcase sitting beside my feet allowed me to extract the encrypted hard drive containing the massive cache of embezzlement evidence I had successfully acquired during my warehouse infiltration. Placing the digital storage device directly on top of the commercial loan files effectively merged the two distinct halves of my devastating retaliation strategy into one undeniably lethal weapon. The undeniable proof of Tamara secretly funneling tens of millions of corporate dollars into fraudulent shell companies constituted a severe breach of fiduciary duty that inherently violated the core covenants of their primary banking agreements. Utilizing these specific legal violations granted the primary debt holder the absolute legal authority to trigger an immediate default status across all their currently active commercial credit lines. Demanding the early repayment of the principal loan balances would instantly bankrupt the entire fashion corporation because their operational cash reserves were already completely drained by the parasitic greed of my younger sister. Reviewing these catastrophic financial vulnerabilities clearly demonstrated that the very people who proudly considered me a worthless failure had effectively handed me the exact tools needed to permanently dismantle their arrogant legacy. Processing the sheer magnitude of the impending corporate collapse brought a genuine sense of cold satisfaction to my mind while contemplating the ultimate fate of the people who had callously discarded me. I rhythmically tapped my index finger against the smooth wooden surface of the conference table to emphasize the critical urgency of our next immediate legal maneuver. Initiate the transfer procedures immediately, Arthur, because I want to hold the absolute power to foreclose on all their assets by the end of this week. Arthur offered a firm nod of professional agreement while uncapping his premium fountain pen to formally sign the official corporate execution documents right in front of me without a single moment of hesitation. Everything is completely ready to go forward since your family still has absolutely no idea that their current biggest creditor is actually you. His swift signature on those legally binding papers effectively weaponized the commercial debt by officially registering my private investment firm as the sole authorized owner of their massive financial obligations. Leaving the secure high-rise office building required Arthur to immediately travel toward the district commercial court to formally file the mandatory debt reassignment notifications with the presiding federal bankruptcy judge. Completing these stringent legal protocols officially transformed me into the singular financial executioner, holding the absolute power of life or death over the sprawling enterprise my parents valued far above my own existence. We deliberately structured the aggressive foreclosure timeline to perfectly coincide with the upcoming 30th anniversary gala celebration, currently being hosted by the corporate board of directors at the end of the month. They were currently spending enormous amounts of borrowed capital to orchestrate an incredibly lavish public networking event designed to falsely project unparalleled financial strength to their global industry partners. Striking them down at the exact pinnacle of their unearned glory would permanently shatter their arrogant illusions while maximizing the psychological devastation of my triumphant return to the society they banished me from. The meticulously calculated trap was finally set into motion, leaving them absolutely no room to escape the catastrophic consequences of their own boundless arrogance. Throughout the following week, a suffocating atmosphere of pure panic rapidly infected every single department operating within the massive fashion corporate headquarters. Constant rumors regarding an impending financial default continuously circulated among the panicked employees, desperately trying to secure their precarious job positions. Dad received multiple aggressive phone calls directly from their primary banking partners, aggressively demanding immediate clarification regarding the sudden structural transfer of their commercial debt. The frightened executives completely failed to comprehend how a completely anonymous private equity firm had successfully purchased their entire mortgage portfolio without triggering any preliminary warning signals. Witnessing their total lack of situational awareness confirmed my absolute belief that their arrogant corporate leadership style had fundamentally blinded them to the lethal vulnerabilities existing within their own organization. The foundation of their precious empire was actively crumbling beneath their feet, while they stubbornly refused to acknowledge the undeniable reality of their catastrophic financial mismanagement. Tamara began exhibiting severe signs of psychological distress while desperately trying to maintain her polished facade of absolute executive control during emergency strategy meetings. She practically sprinted through the corporate corridors while frantically sending countless urgent text messages directly to Levi regarding their compromised financial position. Their primary objective immediately shifted toward rapidly accelerating the illicit transfer of all remaining liquid corporate assets directly into their hidden offshore shell accounts. Liquidating the emergency cash reserves essentially removed the final safety net, preventing the entire fashion corporation from instantly declaring total bankruptcy. Watching them desperately attempt to drain the final drops of lifeblood from their own family legacy proved exactly how incredibly parasitic their ultimate intentions truly were. Their blind greed completely overshadowed any lingering trace of basic human morality or genuine concern for the thousands of employees relying on the company for their basic livelihoods. Despite suffering from a severe internal liquidity crisis, Mom and Dad stubbornly decided to proceed with hosting the lavish 30th anniversary gala celebration. They genuinely believed that throwing an incredibly expensive public party would successfully deceive the aggressive financial media, while simultaneously pacifying their increasingly skeptical global investors. Spending their rapidly dwindling capital on expensive catering services clearly demonstrated their pathetic desperation to maintain the fragile illusion of unstoppable corporate success. I stood quietly in the shadowed hallway outside the main executive boardroom while actively monitoring their chaotic internal communications right before the event officially commenced. The commercial banks are actively forcing us to liquidate our remaining collateral because if we fail to secure new venture capital tonight, this entire company will completely collapse. Dad violently slammed his fist directly onto the polished mahogany table while desperately glaring at the terrified board members surrounding him. Please stop worrying about the aggressive bankers because my grand presentation tonight will completely resolve all our current public relations issues. Tamara quickly interrupted with a sickeningly sweet tone, intentionally designed to falsely manipulate his fragile emotional state. At exactly 7 o'clock that evening, the magnificent crystal chandeliers illuminated the massive corporate reception hall, packed with wealthy industry elites eagerly awaiting the official anniversary presentation. Dad stood proudly behind the central podium while preparing to formally announce his highly anticipated decision to transfer absolute executive control directly over to Tamara. He enthusiastically praised her imaginary brilliant leadership skills, while the crowd politely applauded the carefully orchestrated succession ceremony unfolding before them. They remained entirely oblivious to the catastrophic financial reality secretly lurking just beneath the glamorous surface of their exclusive high society gathering. The sheer hypocrisy of their public celebration perfectly set the stage for the most devastating revelation they would ever experience in their entire miserable lives. I forcefully pushed the heavy oak doors wide open while stepping directly into the crowded reception hall with a renewed sense of absolute authority. My cheap catering uniform was completely replaced by a meticulously tailored power suit specifically designed to project an aura of undeniable dominance. The sudden loud noise caused hundreds of confused guests to instantly turn their heads toward the entrance while desperately trying to identify the uninvited intruder disrupting the ceremony. I completely ignored their shocked whispers while walking directly down the center aisle with my chin held incredibly high and my focus entirely locked on the stage. The pathetic era of hiding in the dark basement was officially over because I was finally ready to violently reclaim my stolen legacy right in front of the entire world. A split second after breaching the heavy doors, I marched directly toward the central presentation stage with absolute unwavering purpose. Ascending the plush carpeted stairs allowed me to physically confront the bewildered executives currently staring at my unexpected arrival. I forcefully snatched the wireless microphone straight from the trembling hand of my father before he could utter a single defensive syllable to stop me. Turning toward the centralized audiovisual control booth, I commanded the lead technician to immediately bypass their promotional presentation to display my personal encrypted data drive on the massive LED screen. The sheer authority radiating from my voice compelled the confused technical staff to comply without seeking any secondary authorization from the paralyzed board members standing nearby. The enormous digital display instantly illuminated the darkened reception hall with dozens of glowing red bank statements. Projecting these highly classified documents completely exposed the complex money laundering network actively operating within their corporate foundation. The undeniable numerical evidence clearly demonstrated how tens of millions of dollars had been systematically siphoned directly from the primary operational reserves over the past several months. Tracking the offshore routing numbers visually confirmed that the stolen capital was successfully funneled straight into 3 distinct shell companies currently registered in the state of Nevada. The irrefutable paper trail unequivocally identified Tamara and Levi as the sole architects responsible for bleeding the entire fashion empire completely dry. Hundreds of camera flashes erupted from the designated press section as ruthless financial journalists desperately captured the explosive corporate scandal unfolding right before their greedy eyes. Facing the blinding scrutiny of the aggressive media caused Tamara to violently stumble backward while desperately shaking her head in total panicked denial. Her carefully constructed facade of unearned superiority instantly shattered into pieces as the absolute reality of her massive federal crimes became public knowledge. Levi recognized the catastrophic legal implications, immediately prompting him to execute a sickening display of cowardly self-preservation right on the stage. He aggressively pointed his finger directly at his own fiancé, while loudly screaming that she alone orchestrated the entire embezzlement scheme without his genuine consent. Watching the 2 arrogant parasites viciously tear each other apart to save their own skin provided the exact type of twisted justice I had meticulously planned to deliver. Dad and Mom remained completely frozen beside the speaker podium, looking absolutely devastated by the horrifying betrayal playing out on the giant screen above them. The devastating realization that their precious favorite child had intentionally bankrupted their beloved legacy drained every single drop of color from their aging faces. They stared blankly at the overwhelming financial evidence, finally comprehending the massive scale of the malicious deception occurring right under their completely oblivious noses for the past year. Locking my gaze directly onto their pale expressions allowed me to deliver the final psychological blow with absolute chilling precision. Dad once explicitly stated that I was always a massive disappointment to this prestigious family. Mom eagerly chimed in by claiming they should have only had one child to spare themselves the burden. Furthermore, Tamara actually smirked right at me while confidently declaring that I had completely lost the game the very moment I walked away. Reaching inside my tailored jacket pocket, I retrieved the legally binding debt acquisition contracts before forcefully slamming the heavy documents onto the speaker podium. So, if I truly am an absolute failure, then please explain exactly why the entire financial lifeblood of this pathetic family currently belongs exclusively to me. My piercing question echoed throughout the utterly silent reception hall, while the shocked executives desperately tried to process the catastrophic shift in absolute corporate power. I utilized the microphone one final time to formally declare the immediate activation of my ultimate creditor rights across all outstanding commercial loans, announcing the total freeze on all their corporate assets effectively paralyzed the entire fashion organization from executing any further desperate financial maneuvers. Right on cue, the heavy oak doors swung open once again to admit a highly coordinated team of federal financial investigators. The armed officers swiftly marched up the central aisle to place heavy steel handcuffs firmly onto the wrists of Tamara and Levi. The deafening sound of the media camera shutters intensified significantly as the corrupt couple was forcefully escorted out of the prestigious building to face their impending federal indictments. 6 months later, fallen autumn leaves completely covered the stone steps leading up to the county courthouse, marking the absolute destruction of a once proud fashion dynasty. The presiding federal judge formally sentenced Tamara alongside Levi to serve 10 consecutive years in a maximum security penitentiary for executing massive wire fraud combined with severe breaches of corporate fiduciary duties. This lengthy incarceration period effectively stripped away their entire youth, ensuring they would spend the next decade entirely confined behind cold steel bars. Following their criminal convictions, the designated commercial bankruptcy court officially liquidated the entire fashion empire to completely satisfy my outstanding creditor demands. Dad and Mom were subsequently forced to vacate their luxurious estate while watching the commercial banks ruthlessly repossess their entire stock portfolio, along with their remaining personal assets. The catastrophic loss of their unearned wealth ultimately forced my parents to relocate into an incredibly dilapidated rental apartment situated on the absolute lowest income outskirts of the city. Stepping out of the heavy glass doors of my newly acquired corporate headquarters allowed me to finally breathe the crisp afternoon air of total absolute victory. Dad and Mom were already standing near the entrance curb looking incredibly gaunt, while completely stripped of their previously arrogant high society demeanor. They immediately rushed forward the second they spotted me while desperately employing pathetic tears to beg for some microscopic form of immediate financial salvation. Their hollow voices desperately pleaded for forgiveness, while heavily leveraging the concept of biological family to somehow justify requesting a massive monthly allowance. They genuinely expected me to easily forget years of systematic emotional abuse simply because their preferred golden child had successfully bankrupted their entire miserable existence. Looking directly into their desperate eyes revealed absolutely nothing except a profound, overwhelming emptiness, replacing any lingering shred of familial affection I might have once possessed. Their pathetic crying completely failed to generate even the slightest ripple of empathy within my heart after remembering exactly how casually they had once discarded me. Refusing to utter a single responsive syllable, I simply turned my back on their desperate pleas while walking straight toward the black luxury vehicle waiting nearby. Taking my seat in the quiet cabin signaled the absolute permanent termination of any remaining connection to the people who originally brought me into this world. The driver smoothly pulled away from the curb, leaving them standing entirely alone on the sidewalk to fully absorb the catastrophic consequences of their own toxic choices. This production officially represents a fictional narrative specifically designed to educate audiences regarding the critical importance of establishing firm personal boundaries. The core message emphasizes resolving severe familial betrayal through calculated financial independence, combined with absolute strict adherence to the established legal justice system. Analyzing the decisive actions taken by the protagonist clearly demonstrates exactly how completely severing contact is often the only healthy method to survive a highly toxic environment. The antagonists undeniably deserved their catastrophic financial ruin because their ultimate downfall was entirely orchestrated by their own uncontrollable greed, combined with their absolute lack of basic human decency. Sharing a biological bloodline absolutely never automatically constitutes a genuine family, especially when that specific environment only nurtures extreme favoritism combined with relentless psychological abuse. Allowing unchecked greed to dictate your choices will perpetually guarantee a devastating downfall because choosing to systematically defraud others eventually forces you to face the uncompromising reality of federal law. The absolute most powerful form of retaliation rarely involves engaging in hysterical screaming matches or displaying any pathetic, vulnerable tears in front of your abusers. True victory entirely relies upon maintaining complete silence while simultaneously building absolute financial independence to ensure nobody ever holds the power to trample over your destiny ever again. Thank you so much for patiently listening to the complete evolution of this intense family drama until the very final moment. How do you personally feel about my ultimate decision to completely deny my parents any financial assistance while permanently severing all contact? Do you truly believe offering genuine forgiveness is ever actually warranted in a situation involving such extreme psychological betrayal? Please share your honest perspectives down in the comment section below so we can discuss it together until the next story.